Playing from Joseph's iPhone.
Let me play with you. I'm bored with life, it's got me blue. And I know just what you want me to do to you. I guess we'll see how far we go tonight. I'll do what I say, so baby, all that I need you to know is how far along do I need to know you. I feel the tension in my veins. Sex is all you need from me. Take my word, I wanna hear you screaming my name. Baby girl, it's such a shame. My tongue in cheek, that's a laser. You, my tongue in cheek, wants to get a little deeper. You, I'm fucking you, like the old antiques say. Won't you be a little fragile? And I ask for your mind and everything you get. My tongue and cheek wants to be a little risque and find myself in you. And by that time, we'll be one instead of staying home. Let me show you what I can do. Get everybody wishing that they were just like me and you. Nobody touch and taste and see you the way I do. So lay down and let me give you a little clue. Far along tonight, need to know you. I feel the tension in my veins. Ooh. You need from me, take my word. I wanna hear you screaming my name. Baby girl, no, it's such a shame. My tongue and cheek, take that for later. How far can you go? My tongue and cheek wants to get a little deeper. I'm fucking you. Like the old antiques say, won't you be a little fragile? I ask for your mind and everything you get. My tongue and cheek wants to it's something you, and by that time, we'll be one. Instead of telling me to stay here in this hollow complexion of your eyes, just tell me what I know. Baby, I haven't seen the light in quite some time. I guess he wants to see how far we can go. My tongue and cheek, save that for later. Yeah. How far can you go? Tongue and cheek, wants to get a little deeper. I'm fucking you, babe. The old antiques say, won't you be a little fragile? Yeah, I ask for your mind and everything you get.
Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. So Sammy is on a walk, which is why you were treated to another pre-recorded song from her EP. So everyone, look her up on SoundCloud. So today, chatting about responsiveness, having another discussion with you all. But before that, as usual, how's lockdown? We are so close to the end. In fact, this is probably the last episode that we'll be bringing to you before the end of lockdown. Don't know how not having cabin fever will affect our dynamic on the bench.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Maybe we'll have some pastry and yellow.
Yeah.
I might need to get up at some point.
And we can show them just like a cinnamon scroll. Yeah, no, they're amazing. They're apparently like got these beautiful images of Jurassic IV to
No, they don't.
No, they don't. Not
I'm
quite the
not-
same
I'm
level
not-
of
I'm
commitment
not
to this
a
ranting.
How good are dinosaurs? They're so good. That's the answer. They're really good.
Yeah.
So I had to quickly send the live stream link to my parents so they could watch along.
Cute.
If you are a judge or a team signed up to go to Jurassic IV, I would really appreciate it if you responded to emails we've sent out just to confirm you're available at those times. I know we have quite an internationally diverse tournament, so just confirm you can do those times. And if you're a judge, we're asking for a CV, so hand that in, please.
Will do. So today we're going to be chatting about responsiveness. So all of the different ways you can effectively and efficiently demolish cases coming from the opposition. Of course, you don't want to be hearing our voices the entire time. So remember, you can call in. We'd love you to call in. Just flick a message to Auckland DevSoc and they'll sort you out. If you're from Australia, make sure you include that +61 when you're sending in your phone numbers. And of course, you can always check in by using the anonymous form or just leaving us a comment, and they'll be relayed to Joe, and Joe will read them out in his melodious voice. So a little bit of news, not that much news actually, because a lot of our energy now is devoted towards online tournaments. So obviously Joe is running Jurassic IV pretty soon. Joe and I are debating in the Melbourne Online Open this weekend, which will be very fun.
No, that'll be good.
Joe is pumped. So he can't complain because we're debating with someone, Brindy, in fact, who was a guest on this podcast.
Friend of the pod.
Who has to wake up at 1:30 a.m. to start the day of debating.
I
So
feel terrible for Brindy. She doesn't even know that I'm bad at debating yet. So joke's on her.
Psych. Yeah, but if you are still looking for debating things to keep yourself in the loop, I've got some exciting news for you. The first is that Auckland Club Night is back next week. So as usual, make sure that you register online, get in. This lot will be, of course, participating as usual. Equally, we've got the Thursday development seminars ongoing. No break for the wicked. Last week, well, in fact, not last week, but like yesterday. Yesterday, we covered different types of motions and how to approach those when you're prepping and when you're setting up your cases. And next week, we're talking about prioritization and efficiency, which will be very fun. Auckland Novice Tournament, I think, went very well. Lots of fun. Managed to see some good debates, and some good debates were streamed, and Joe and I judged a final together, which was cute. Yeah, so that was very nice. And then, of course, as Joe sees every week when Grace and I have to plonk down on the dining room table to judge schools debating, Aotearoa Online Schools Debating is still, of course, ongoing. So if you are keen to get involved, flick a message to Ailey Sampeno or Zach Wong, or go to the New Zealand University debating page.
It's a lovely thing to do,
I agree.
to be able to let the kids have some normal stuff. Yeah. And we love debating and the kids love debating. It's a win. Huge win-win. I've been doing a lot of study. I've got an exam in the next week and a half.
As of the end of this beer, I'm out of beer and wine. Until our countdown shot gets tonight. There's a countdown shot.
You may be out of beer/wine for like 1 hour.
It's going to be a bad hour.
It is.
It's going to be a bad hour, but we'll get through.
Yeah.
Also, quick note: the sponsor of today's pod is Xi'an Food Bar. They're not actually the sponsor of the episode, but we love them as a restaurant, and we do not want them to go under. So as soon as level 3 finishes, everyone go eat at Xi'an Food Bar. That's spelled XI''AN Food Bar.
I think if we can go and get takeaways on level 3, we'll be there with bells on.
Oh, so many times. And in fact, tonight Joe is making us a noodle dish that is reminiscent, but not exactly.
Well,
Inspired
doesn't-
by-
But doesn't quite reach the same
No,
heights.
Inspired by a tribute. It's
Glowing
like a tribute
eyes.
band.
Joe is a Xi'an tribute
I'm a
band.
tribute band.
Neat.
Tribute bands are good.
First thing, I'm going to drag the discussion back to debating. First thing that I wanted to throw out to the group, have a little bit of discussion, is what is the difference between a substantive point and a rebuttal point? Because as I've been indoctrinating everyone through the development seminars, I actually don't think there's a huge amount of difference between rebuttal and substantive material, in that you're trying to assert a version of the world and it should be all part of a piece of case. So I think that we think about them as two differently, when in fact it's all like an integrated melange of trying to push one version of the world over another.
Yes and no. So it's like I agree with you in theory.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
think
some
you're-
nuances,
I think
yeah.
you're right. But they're useful labeling when we're trying to teach young people the basic mechanics of debating. And that is to say that under a simple, high quality debate at a youth level or high school level or novice level, you would expect affirming to introduce a case, you expect negating to introduce a case. And the responsive portion of the debate is the effort by the affirmative team to respond to the negatives case directly.
Yeah.
And the negatives team efforts to respond to the affirmative team's case directly. So, yeah, in theory, it's just this big wibbly wobbly mash of stuff. But in reality, we try to add structure to the ways we think about the structure of debating. I think in a useful way.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we've called this episode Responsiveness rather than just rebuttal. And I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion of how you prep cases with responsiveness in mind, and making sure you have that ongoing engagement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like in an obvious case, I'd be like, oh, well, substantive's your case and rebuttal's responding to theirs. But then sometimes you have debates where, like, as the negative team, your whole case is responsive. Like say an emotion, it's like, this house would do X policy. Sometimes the case you build at neg is actually just substantively why that policy won't work with that.
Yeah.
And that case, the lines do blur a lot. But you need to, but like then in that instance, you need to have reasons why the other team's material is incorrect. Hopefully, in addition to your case.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's sometimes teams get into this trap where they're like, oh, well, our case implicitly responds to the ACT case. So I'm just going to repeat our case over and over. You actually need to cross the bench and like.
Yeah, and potentially my phrasing does give the impression that you need to just focus on your case and defending your particular case. Because though when you're responding to things, you are still trying to build a world. Obviously within debates, most of the time, actually often, the clashes don't exactly match. Like you won't be necessarily trying to build a world that helps you win the debate or as part of your substantive contribution that is against theirs, but you will have to engage in trying to defuse some of the things that they're trying to set up.
I've got an interesting, very random comment here. Sorry, I don't know if you have things you want to talk about, but I think with school speakers and novice speakers, in terms of analysis, the thing that they get good at first is their own material. So I
disagree. I really disagree. I really disagree.
So finish off that
I think generally they get told to, okay, what are you going to prove? How are you going to prove? Let's step through how it works. And I think sometimes school speakers get better at doing that well before they get better at analytically responding to the other team. So it's like analytical reasons why the other team is not correct.
Interesting. I disagree. I think young, promising speakers tend to be most effective because they are early able to show promise and analytically respond to the other team's case. I.e., they say, look, hold on, that's not right because X implies Y, not X implies Z.
And it's why good school speakers get put to third because they can think on their feet.
Classic, right? Whereas I actually think it takes them a little while to be like, oh, hold on. If I want to prove that X causes Y, perhaps I should put that in the substantive portion of the case in addition to just responding to the other team. So
it's weird because I see so many, well, I mean, I probably just maybe tripping people, but I see so many schools debates where they've like clearly stepped through how their analysis works, but the rebuttal is so 2D.
So here's how I think you square that circle. I would think I agree 100% with Grace for the vast majority of school speakers in that they stand up and they're like, here's my case, and they have zero ability to engage. And in fact, they are probably better at constructing possible worlds than responding effectively. But the group of students that I think Joe was speaking about, people who have a lot of promise, I think their rebuttal skills very aggressively take off because there's so much to push against, and it's so much easy to hone your...
It is a good sign of like natural like intelligence and talent as opposed to being well coached.
Yeah.
You know, and being taught how to construct points.
I agree.
Yeah, so
when you see a kid come out like a real takedown, you're like, oh, okay.
That kid might know some stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that actually gets to something that is quite difficult about trialing or selecting speakers, in that case construction and case prep is very much about the team. It's about what you agree is the case. And then obviously like individual speakers' ability to express things clearly will come out. But a lot of the times, very good first speakers are essentially dictated to, and then they take these ideas and put it in a clear packaged way. And often one of the few things that we judge speakers individually on is their ability to rebut, because that is way less team driven. Often it's responding to the speaker before them. And sometimes I think there might be a little bit of a bias in terms of how we think about the quality of later responsive speakers in the debate against earlier speakers in the debate, because they are able to demonstrate that ability to think clearly, and we just don't have an ability to project ourselves into the correct way.
I have a question. When you're on the app, you're in the prep room, do you think about responsiveness?
Yeah.
Is it something? How do you think about it?
So I always remember break down the debate into two things. When I'm at the beginning of the debate, I think about the comparative, and I have lost debates to Grace in national semifinals because I didn't clearly think through enough the comparative. I took that was the joint semifinal, where I was like, here's what I think the reasonable interpretation of this is. And they were like, no, the words of the motion drive this particular narrative. And we were just blown out of the water there because we weren't able to shift our case enough. That was just a failing on our side. We didn't think, how are they going to push the motion that's most favorable to them? We just went with our prima facie engagement with it. So I think it was a very smart move and what neg teams should be thinking of doing, trying to pull the debate in one direction or the other. For some bit of color, that debate was about Māori politicians criticizing where politics is unfavorable to Māori people
So it's like
within
if you
major
were
parties.
a Labour Party Māori MP,
Yeah.
would you always criticise the Labour Party when it was?
So we really missed the always section of that. So we came out with a very strong defense of the Māori party splitting off from Labour in terms of foreshore and seabed or big Māori issues, where the opposition was a little bit happy to concede that ground and dragged it more and really tested that always bit. And they were like, no, you'd be overwhelmed with having to criticize every single bit of policy because everything is interconnected, which is I think a fair and just showed that we hadn't structured our case in a way that engaged with the best case coming out of the opposition. So that's one thing that's very easy to miss there.
What do you think makes a good responsive speaker?
I think efficiency to me makes a good responsive speaker. There are a lot of good speakers who are great at line-by-line rebuttal, but lack the strategic analysis to take the scattergun of the opposition, cut it into lines of the basic analysis they're bringing, and then being able to attack those basic lines. So that prioritization, structural efficient
Who do you think the best responsive speakers in the country are right now?
Best responsive speakers.
What do you mean responsive? Their responsiveness is good.
Well, it's an episode about responsiveness.
Oh,
If we can't build a notion of responsiveness, we should probably just
So I think that I actually do well. I don't think New Zealanders as a circuit are good at responsiveness. I think we do not approach it in nearly the same level of thoroughness. Partly because our style allows us to ignore points a lot more than other styles. So for example, in Australia, you can lose a lot of debates by not engaging with something and not responding to something that is patently dumb. So obviously, I think the best responsive speakers in the world, I think the clear current best responsive speaker in the world would be Conor O'Brien. He was nuclear at Australs at third because of his ability to just respond to everything within the debate. And there's been criticism that it's a slightly negative way of debating just to flat and deny every single thing that is said by the opposition and is kind of a blunt tool. But I found that thoroughness and that efficiency probably set him apart as a brilliant third speaker. So go back and watch some of his speeches. And it's interesting seeing, I think that's creeping into some New Zealand style. So I personally think the way that some young Aucklanders are debating is incredibly similar to the Conor O'Brien style of just aggressive responding to stuff. And then there are speakers who are able to respond by shifting debate in a different direction. And that's a different skill altogether that other debaters are good at.
Can I show the world what
Yes,
I
of
say?
course.
So I don't know if people can see that. I hope you can see that. So it's just I made some homemade custard and put it over some puff pastry and some almonds and apricot on top. So it's just like a little custard, apricot, almond Danish thing.
It looks delicious. Who do you think is some of the best responsive speakers in New Zealand or overseas? I also see Israeli debaters.
struggle with that. I struggle. I find that a hard question to answer.
So actually, if you,
I spend so much of my time speaking that I'm not good at objectively noticing the strengths of other speakers. I'm always so fixated on beating them in debates.
Yeah. Moving away from New Zealand, again, I think a circuit that is very good at responsiveness is the Israeli circuit.
Yeah.
So I would go and watch Dan Lahav and Ayal debating at Mexico Worlds a couple years ago. This is something that's often discussed by ESL teams. You have to rely on a slightly different set of skills when you're an ESL team because you can't just do the beautiful Australian narrative-y stuff. And of course, the best Israeli speakers are able to just pump out those narratives because they speak English excellently. But they also have to bring a very specific, efficient way to dealing with material that I think has really boosted them and has probably spilled over a lot into the way that we debate now.
When I feel, this is not a comment on best responsive speaker because I'm not making that claim. But when I'm really happy with my responsiveness in a speech I give, it's because I've been time efficient. I've worked out what I need to respond to, what good analysis I need to provide, and I've gone for it really efficiently.
Can I just tease off that? You said to open that what you need to respond to. What do you mean by that?
You have to work out what the key claims that the other side is making. So, it's the classic thing where teams, you see school kids falling for low-hanging fruit, points that the other team gives that don't matter, that won't decide the debate.
So walk through that. You're trying to find material that matters for determining who wins, right? And that means logically crucial analysis, right?
Yes.
Because I think that's important. I think a lot of people miss that because I think a lot of people will over-respond to cases, which is to say you can through quite deft sleights of hand remove large portions of other teams' speeches by saying, well, it's not relevant or something. So, for example, what I tried to coach into the girls when Emily and I were coaching them was, well, hold on. If you just agree with the other team's principal claim, you can just accept that. And you can just get rid of half their speech. Because particularly in schools debates where you see kids rock up and you get 3 or 4 minutes of principal material, just accept it. Just be like, we agree, that stakeholder matters as well. Let's move on to the relevant material. That is responding. And it is good responsiveness, but it does not mean it requires minutes and minutes of rebuttal.
Yeah.
And I think people could be more strategic on that front. If something's non-contentious, don't respond to it. Say it's non-contentious. Perhaps explain why being non-contentious is important and then move on.
I want to push you on that a little bit. I definitely think figuring out where to prioritize your material is really important when you're doing rebuttal. But I do think we have a culture of New Zealand that's just different to everywhere else in the world in that we're way more comfortable not dealing with material and just pushing our case and being like, I think that's unimportant. Here's what's important. I would caution that approach, especially overseas, because I've lost a lot of debates by just asserting my version of the world really strongly and thinking that would win.
But hold on. That's different.
Yeah.
That's different.
No, I agree.
What you should be doing is you should just agree with the other team's version of the world in limited circumstances where a lack of tension over that view of the world means that you can be time efficient.
Yeah.
So it doesn't say, no, that's bullshit, here's our version. It's to say, we agree your version of the world is correct, and that's why your case can't work.
Yeah, it's strategic thinking. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think people miss that. And I think people can be more efficient with that, which is to say, just accept the other team's world, then say, and even under those circumstances, you are unable to fulfill your burden. That is better.
Yeah.
In my view.
Sorry, can I just tease back to an earlier question that you asked about setting up your case, especially from AF? Because I chatted about the comparative and losing the debate when you don't set it up appropriately. But equally, especially with what you're talking about, you need to have a clear view of your framework. You need to figure out what your win conditions are. Because only when you know how you win the debate, whether you agree on the outcomes but disagree whether that's a good or a bad outcome, or you agree on the same principal material but disagree on how to get there or different outcomes, that's having that in your mind and saying that to judge is the way that you get that prioritization and the way you can say the reason why it doesn't matter that I aren't able to convince you of this point is because this. And that's the point where you can start building in even ifs. So you can go through those different layers of analysis. And so gaming out the different versions of the world is such a strong debating skill.
In versions of debating with replies, that might be your reply speech.
Yeah.
You might, I've done this on occasion, just game out the debate. Literally, think about it like the sort of tree diagram you do in probability when you're in year 8 or 9 or whatever, right? And it's all the different versions of the world and the associated probabilities. We're not calculating probabilities so as much as we are to map out all the different versions of alternate worlds contingent on us accepting different premises.
Yeah.
And then what you have is a complete tree diagram of outcomes. Your mission then at the reply speech, should you choose to accept it, is to explain why each world is either implausible and cannot happen, or you win under that world.
Yeah.
And if you can do that for every single version of the world, say either it's impossible or we win, guess what? You win the debate.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So that's another reason why I think Conor O'Brien is a fantastic responsive speaker. You will hear him in each point have his headline very efficient, explain the point, explain the rebuttal, and then have like 6 layers of even ifs going through why each of the things. And this is potentially where Australian debating with that need for the opposition to engage and basically like the last point standing kind of wins things way more than in New Zealand debating. Like it really helps you in the Australian style, but I think it's something we could adopt in the New Zealand style. You need to build in those alternatives as to how you deal with things.
Can we take a question?
Yes, let's take a question.
Let's take so many.
Fuck, that's a lot of questions.
Oh, it is. What I'm going to do. Let's do this first one. When I rebut, I often find myself falling into the trap of not taking the other team's point at their best or not picking up on its nuances, which later speakers can then exploit. Any tips on thoughts on this? I have 2 things.
Yeah.
First one is, you might be being lazy.
Yeah.
Your subconscious might be so outraged by the other team's case. You're like, oh, it's just a dumb and silly point. You're angry because you're competitive and you're inside the debate. You need to actively put yourself in that more passive mindset of not getting outraged by the other team's case and just thinking, what are they trying to say? What are they trying to prove? How do I respond to it? The other thing is that you're not listening. I know it's really hard when you're the next speaker and you're trying to write stuff down and you're trying to listen, but sometimes it can be valuable if you just take a moment, step away from the paper and just listen. Ignore what your teammates are saying, tell them to shut the fuck up, just tell them to quiet down, and just take a moment and just listen. What exactly are they saying? Where are they going? Because I suspect you'll be missing nuances because, Grace is on my ear, Joe, you need to do this, you have to respond to this. No, Grace, that's silly, I don't want to respond to their principal material. And then you're trying to write stuff down and then stuff's happening up there. Just be like, Grace, be quiet, put your pen down, take a breath, and listen. And back yourself to be able to write the responses fast enough that your responses will only matter if you actually properly understand what their case is. Thoughts?
To just kind of elaborate on what Joe's just said, the awkward paradox here, I think I'm using paradox correctly, is that sometimes it's easier to respond to a better team than a worse team. Because a good team explicitly signals what is important and why it is important and how they think they're going to win, which is obviously really useful because then you know what the fuck they're doing and why. Whereas sometimes with maybe you're not facing as good a team, it's actually can be hard to work out. But just like in terms of what Joe says, make sure that someone's listening to the introduction. What does the introduction say about how they think they're going to win? Listen to their signposting. What are they signposting as most important? And ask the obvious questions. What material are they running first? That gives you clues about why they think they're going to win.
Yeah.
It's simple things. It's like, don't just be like, oh, their point is X. You want to hear all the associated commentary they're making on that point during their speech.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear the comments like, we're going to win on this material because X. Yeah.
So I'll add, I think, 2 very practical tips. And the first is that I disagree slightly with Joe about what other teammates are good for. Because yes, to some degree, you need to shut up your teammates if they're distracting you from being able to listen. But I personally find I can't listen to everything. And I often do miss stuff, which concerns me. So the way I use my teammates is you want to stop your teammates just talking about things that are popping into their heads during the debate, like, oh, we can have this response or this response, this response. I use my teammates in 2 ways when I'm the speaker, right after the speaker. One is I get them to summarize points to me. So if I am writing my speech and that person's just given their signposting, my teammate will always have written down that person's signposting. So then I can be like, fuck, I can't remember what the third point was. What was their third point? They can be like, this was their third point. You need to address it. So that just makes sure I cover everything. And then the second thing is I'll often turn to the speaker when I'm trying to grapple with a point, and I'll be like, what was the best version of that point? What were they trying to achieve at that point? You need to train your teammates to actually give you the best version, not just how to deal with it. And then they can trust you to put together that rebuttal. Because I personally find my brain just can't cope with all of that listening and all of that like thinking and putting to your rebuttal. It's like a lot of things to think about. This is why I don't think I'm like a brilliant third speaker. But I really like using my teammates just to be like, just tell me what their point means. And then I can just apply my mind, respond to it, game out those things, and you got to trust your other partner to do that. Equally, if you have a point that you've picked up that you think is really important and you can't think of anything, you're just staring at the paper, throw that to your teammate. Just be like, hey, I need a response to this. I'm going to think about other things for now. And then in a little bit, you come back to them and be like, what was the response? And they're like, Daniel, I've got 5 responses. And
I don't think we disagree.
Yeah,
I don't think we disagree, really. I'm just saying that I think sometimes people don't take the time to properly listen to the speaker at hand. I think they should do that. You're right to say that if you can't think of the response, kick it down the line.
Yeah.
That's not to say the response should come later. You need to get your other speaker to write that response for you.
Yeah. So by saying it later, I just like ask them later.
Naturally,
Just like, and then you
naturally,
slot
yeah.
it back in.
You can't actually write your English assignment on the Spark Notes. You've got to read the book, you know? By which I mean, listen to the speech.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I agree with that. Like, and this is just me. I know I miss things when I'm listening and I'm also coming up. I don't think my brain does that dual
But
split thing that well. Yeah, sorry, that's the key.
So if your friend reads the book and then tells all your other friends about it, then you can write your
Zach is preparing my Sparks notes. You got to make sure that your teammate is good, and you got to trust them. And I think, yeah, maybe this works when you've debated with someone for heaps.
I don't have any helpful tips here, but it is funny that you do sometimes get that brain freeze where you're just like,
Outrounds?
I don't know. No,
I get it during outrounds.
I get sometimes I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just like, I've never heard of rebuttal. I don't know what rebuttal is, and I cannot come up with any for this point. It's just like, brain's empty. My full brain cells are just like.
So I think it's a sensation, not an actual outcome. I always feel during outruns that I'm not absorbing the other team's
I
case.
just get into a mode and I'm just like.
So I like really
I'm
writing the
playing the
rebuttal,
debate.
but I find it harder to take that step back. And I
Yeah,
think it's
okay,
because
yeah.
of the natural
Oh, that's
adrenaline
not what I'm
pressure.
talking about.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean for outruns, but
Yeah.
sometimes I just get into a debate and my brain just stops and I'm just like, I don't understand
Oh
why that point is
yeah,
wrong.
you are like
Do you know what I
that.
mean?
You are
So
like
I
that.
Just
don't
my teammates are great. Yeah. Sorry, I had a second bit of practical feedback that I love to give. Part of the reason why you don't respond to the best case is just because you forget to do it. So when I'm structuring, and we'll have a chat about how we structure responsiveness, but especially when I'm speaking second or third, when I have my point of clash, I'll be like, this is what we said, this is our case, this is what they said, and then I'll explain what their like push is, and then I'll say, at best, this is what they achieve. And you really need to be like, if they're able to prove to you this, judge, this is what I think the natural consequence will be, and then you start mitigating it. But of course, judge, that's not true for X, Y, and Z reasons. So if you structure, here is the best case, even if they're able to achieve their best case, this is why they don't win, here, and then start going level by level down, that they're unable to even achieve that. They're unable to even achieve that. It's kind of like even ifs, but inverted. I start with their best case, and then I go like, yeah, but here's a more reasonable version, and here's an even more reasonable version. And look, judge, here is the actual version that both teams need to engage with. I find that a really good way to like narrow my approach to points, start at the best, and then get closer towards what I can then frame to the judge as the reasonable interpretation of the particular point, the particular context. Neat.
I had another thought, and this is really not a helpful thought, but you know how we're like, oh, in prep, do you think about responsiveness? I do this really, really unhelpful, annoying thing in prep that Nick and Connor will know. Whereas I sit down in prep and I'm like, what is F meant to do in this debate? What's Nick meant to do in this debate?
You did this heaps at NZBP.
Yeah.
We'd be like sitting there and prep and be like, what even is this? And it's like,
I'll go get it.
Ooh. Yeah, I asked this really unhelpful question, and it's like me very inarticulately. Sorry, we get really excited. Thank you. Oh, what is it?
packing.
Oh.
Sorry, Grace, some I call packages packing.
After the
from a meme.
famous meme.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I was saying was, you get this like, it's me trying to ask what are the clashes in this debate going to be, but I like to ask it in the least articulate and least helpful way possible, which is why I ask,
Which is
what is this debate? What
what
are we arguing
do
here?
you even do at CG?
We have groceries.
You're in a little church, right?
Yeah, that's this is not a helpful tip for anyone, but that's what I do in prep. I sit there and I'm like, what is the vibe here? It's kind of like me asking, what are the issues we're talking about here? What stance is F likely to take because of this motion? What stance is Neg likely to take? And that then kind of helps me coalesce where the clashes. Because if you think about the motion, be like, are we likely to clash on whether this policy works? Or are we likely to clash on this policy versus another policy? Or are we likely to clash on which groups matter more? That would be my key take.
Nice. Another question.
Someone's asked, how much responsiveness is required from the first neg in different debates? What's the best way to concisely respond as the first neg? I mean, best way to concisely respond as the first neg is to front load your rebuttal.
Yeah.
I have three things I'm going to talk about. But first, a few lines of response. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, that's as easy as it gets.
Yeah. And I often put your most important bit of rebuttal just straight into your introduction. Like,
No.
I did this.
Bad.
No, I think that's good. If they've missed something big about the context of the debate that affects lots of their different points, front load it. Be like, if this is a debate about Southeast Asia
Oh.
and China is a huge thing they've missed and responds to a lot of the
Oh.
material,
That's
dive in with your introduction.
if it's a context thing.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, sorry. Just to be clear, like I personally don't like the advice sometimes you give to school speakers of doing like ethos attacks, where you pick some small thing that they've done wrong and just like wreck it repeatedly. I think that's an inefficient use of it.
I think if it's a context thing, you can put it in your rebuttal. Put it in your intro. But I hate it when people just put lines of response in your introduction.
Oh yeah, you need an introduction. Just be
I
clear.
think
Your introduction to seek to explain the world where you win the debate.
At first neg, sometimes depending on the debate, like as I just said, if you're disagreeing on like whether the policy is good or bad, then it's probably some of your stuff can be integrated without you taking much extra time during your delivering your
Yeah.
substantive. But the other thing is, I think at first neg, you've just got to kind of like accept you can't give every response that your team might want to give. Like you that's not your job. Your job's to deliver your case. So if you get out a very brief version of the response you would like to give, that's actually fine, because what you want really at first, you're not going to be able to decisively take down their case unless for some reason they're really bad and you're really good. You are likely to only spend like 60, 90 seconds on rebuttal. So it's like in that, what you're wanting to do is get out some key responses very concisely so that the judge kind of notes that, and then your second speaker can build that and your third speaker can whip it. Like you're not ever going to do as much rebuttal as you want to do in a first neg speech because your priority is something else.
Yeah.
So it's
Do you
about
speak first name?
no.
Because I do.
I know.
Very
Okay,
helpful.
okay, but when we're talking about second substantives, you two were very eager to talk over
Yeah,
that.
and I spent the whole time talking about how you did such a good job and talking
I
about
appreciated
why
that.
you do
That's
such a good
very
job.
true.
And I was analysing
true, I
your
appreciated
success and why you do such a great job, wasn't I?
So my approach to dealing with rebuttal at first neg, and I do actually do a lot of first neg speaking.
Oh,
No, that was more to please Joe than to. So my credentials, I can show them. So I am maybe a little bit different to Joe in that I'm not hugely wild about a standalone rebuttal section. I think that it creates inefficiencies within your speeches unless you're able to do it particularly well. So how do I approach it? Your rebuttal section should be for bits of the debate that you need to gatekeep out of the debate, or you want to respond but don't really fit in with the rest of the issues that you're talking about. Say they had a third point on something random, just smash it, hit it hard, try and push it out of the debate, and then your later speakers can clean it up if they try to build it up each. Because remember, the point of view at first neg is you have to deliver your case, and so often a first neg speaker will spend too much time on rebuttal, just mess up their timing, not develop their case, and then that falls apart. So I only really put non-integratable material into my rebuttal section and just smack it. Also, it's about gatekeeping. You need to respond to each point at least a little bit, otherwise it'll become a much bigger issue. Teams will be able to grow if you want enough time to respond. So make sure you're being thorough there when you're actually dealing with stuff. For the stuff that Joe wanted to talk about, having those headline responses in just a brief way, and Grace was also talking about it, I actually integrate that straight into my signposting. So if there's one headline bit of response, I'm going to explain how this operates in a different way because of X, I just put that straight into my signposting when you have a clearly clashing debate. So I'll be the first thing I'm going to talk about is this point and why their rule doesn't work because of this thing. Then I'm going to talk about this point and why blah, blah, blah. So if you are just using headlines, I don't put that in my main rebuttal section, because obviously I'm going to speak about it when I get to those actually clashing issues. And maybe I just lack self-discipline, so I'll try and push out that rebuttal section and then my speech timing will fall to pieces. But if you want to headline it, I headline it straight from my...
Can I tell you a secret?
Yes.
The secret about me is that I'm very lazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I like winning. Which means that my first neg speech almost always attempts to mirror what the F is trying to do in the debate. So a couple of years ago, I remember I was on a free speech motion, and the other side were like, oh no, but minorities and people feeling sad and all this kind of stuff, right? It's like, fuck this. I'm not going to stand for the principle of free speech. Our entire case is just going to be how do we get a better long-term deal for minorities and vulnerable people and that kind of thing. And that just makes your job at first neg so much easier, because big secret for kids at home, your responsive material is just your substantive case.
Yeah, and this is what we were talking about.
Exactly. Which isn't, and you should have earmarked responsive material where helpful. It just makes your life so much easier, because then you don't even have to worry about whether you respond or not, because when you're recharacterizing the way mechs happen and stuff. Like you just do it inherently. Like for example, if you're like, yeah, we just care about like minorities and whatever, how do we get better outcomes for them? That is inherently comparative material. You almost always put in response material without even thinking about it.
Yeah. So we've had a chat about first. How do you think second and the approach at second changes, Grace?
Thank you, Daniel. What I just said before about first when I was told to shut up because I'm not a first speaker, which is fair, probably applies to second, is it's like you're what?
No, sorry, carry on.
You're operating on tight time constraints, but you do have a bit more time at second. I try and keep my timing really good. I always, well, pretty much always, I spend too long on the first issue I want to deal with. Obviously, it's usually 2 or 3, so it's like making sure your timing is good so you actually get through all 3 things, because it's usually 2 or 3 or 4 points you're trying to get through a second. So for me, I think timing is critical. One thing that you get better at as you become more confident as a speaker is realizing how much you can prove with how few words and how little time. The thing that school speakers do without realizing it is that they repeat themselves. So it's a second, it's about being really time efficient and getting through lots of analytical attacks. In terms of how I approach second, I usually put my second rebuttal material first. I have a split at the end of my speech. I always signpost my rebuttal. So I say in the speech, 4 things. First on this issue, second on that.
Yeah, I also do the issue breakdown.
One of my pet peeves is when second speakers be like, I'm going to do a substantive, but first some rebuttal. And I'm like, what rebuttal?
Yeah.
And the reason I like to break it into issues is that is an easy way at second, without doing the job of your third, to begin to lay out how you guys see the debate, what you think the key issues are. So you signpost them, kind of like a little baby third.
So, but the thing is, like, I potentially go a little bit farther where I'm not like just like a baby third. I actually do just break down the debate into issues and normally integrate my extension material. Yeah. So we agree there. One thing I will add is that I think second, and one of the reasons why second is so much fun, is second AF, and the difference between second AF and second neg is the most dramatic, I think, of any of the gaps between the teams. And you have to. I think the discussion we had about first neg, I think, is also quite appropriate to bring into our discussion of second affirming, because both of those positions are first response. So the first time you have the opportunity to hear the opposition's case and address all of the parts of it. And so part of the second affirming's job, I think, to some degree, is gatekeeping. So the same way that I bring in a very thorough approach to my first negs, and even if it's just like first line responses, I make sure I'm dealing with everything in the case, need to do the same at second AF, and then obviously at second neg, the debate is a little bit more clear. The important issues have come to the fore. You can do just more of that shaping work.
I will disagree with you a little bit here. Clearly the most separate or most different position is first AF and everything else.
To some degree.
Because first neg and second AF, it's just responses, second, and whatever. But first AF has no responsiveness.
True.
Just nothing. You have to fill that entire time with your case. That's quite odd, right, in debating, because across 8 speeches in a 3-on-3, you're the only position that does not have to engage with anyone else.
But should engage. Well, sorry, engage is the wrong word. Should be thinking about.
Oh yeah. No.
Like that's why we crashed and burned at joint score finals, semi-final. So first the case needs to be.
Oh, of course, it has to be. Yeah.
Just as a side note, how satisfying is it when first F gets up and decides to preemptively respond to you?
Oh, but it's not your stuff.
Yes,
that's
it's
the
not
best.
your case, but it's also just like
Dumb
stupid.
as fuck.
And then they spend like 3 or 4 minutes on it. And it's like,
not to be
very satisfying.
Not to be a toxic patriot, but Australians do this so much.
Yeah.
Australians do this all the time at first half, and it's so fucking funny. Sorry to Australians, but like when you verse New Zealand teams, or certainly like teams that I've been on, the Australians will respond to their idea of what is an acceptable neg case. Well, if I got news for them, I'm a reactionary New Zealander, and I'm not going to run what they expect me to run almost any of the time. So it just ends up being a fuck up.
Yeah. So don't be over preemptive. I think is maybe the bit of.
You never know what's going to turn up. You never know what's going to turn up.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like if you want to engage in like preemptive response, I almost would be like, don't frame like that. Like if you want to be like, oh, they could talk about this stakeholder, but ours is more important. Just be like, why is our stakeholder most important?
So I'm going to tell a funny story about what happened at Worlds. That's just passed, because that often also happens to opening teams where they try and burn material from closing or try and respond to what the other closing team did, and they're not really sure. Of course, you have to be very creative in extension, so often they get it wrong. And Zach and I asked a point of information to an opening team. We were a closing team, and the debate was about whether or not children who have grown up should be able to sue their parents for religious indoctrination. And the point of information we asked, or we were we were closing opposition. We asked why they were going for a tort rather than just like a criminal sanction against this. And so the first speaker very well didn't take our bait, just decided to be like, because we think a tort works, and then just went for it. Their second speaker got up and spent 4 minutes of their speech explaining the difference between torts and crimes and why they should go for it. So there's also like a lot of fun you can have as a closing team.
People are so stupid.
It is fun sometimes. I know this is potentially this is a questionable strategy, but it is sometimes fun dropping like bait POIs into a big
I
debate.
love bait POIs, especially when you're having fun.
It's not necessarily the best thing to do strategically, but it's sometimes you just want to stimulate.
You need to get something that they'll bite on. So I often think about POIs when you don't want to give away your extension. You should offer POIs to have engagement, and they should either be pointing out good responses that are new, so not something that the opposition can try and claim. But I also think what you should do with them is create questions within the debate that the opposition feels like they have to respond to, that they're like threatening enough that they need to put energy into rebutting it, but not important enough that you're actually going to devote any time to it. And that's why I quite like the tort versus crime POI, because it hinted at something that could plausibly become an issue for their team if there was a way that it was run. So it meant they had to be inefficient.
Plants it in the judge's mind.
Yeah, plants it in the judge's mind. But if they deal with it well, they've wasted time dealing with it well, you can pivot to all of your other strong material. So dropping those little like almost...
Just taking a big spoon and just stirring that pot. But I would caution against giving like a really good response via POI from closing to opening, because if you're doing it to, say, Deputy Prime Minister, if I was Deputy Leader of the Opposition, I would take your POI and run it as rebuttal. And the judge will end up crediting you at OO, because it's...
they'll fuck you over.
Yeah, so I would not drop you a good rebuttal.
Also,
at least it's 2 DLO and OG now doesn't get your response.
Also, sometimes judges might weigh rebuttal less because there's not much of an opportunity for opening to be able to engage with it if you provide that responsive at closing rather than in a POI.
Yeah.
But I think most of the time they'll just give you the full amount of credit. And it's better to just bash them over here with the response rather than give them an opportunity to respond to it when it's presented as a POI.
Yeah.
Like there's a chance if you give it to them as a POI that they'll be like, oh, but here's this good response. And then the judge will be sitting there at the end of the debate being like, oh, but they did preempt with this good response. But like, you could just respond to it in your speech and it could just sit.
I would give like a really basic response so that the judge notes you as having been engaged in the debate, but then say your best rebuttal for your actual speech.
Yeah, so because I wanted to ask, what is the point of then giving POIs as a closing team? So I like hinting, I like thinking about it as in terms of
I don't think
efficiency.
I tell you what, I don't think there is much of a point, and I almost never offer them.
I like to offer them from closing to opening as a deliberate red herring to get them to waste their time.
Yeah, so
I tell you what
efficiency.
I tell you what I do. I try to provide better versions. I think the best POI is to like a DPM or a DLO.
Yeah.
And it's to provide a better version of a response that had already turned up from the other opening team and responding to your case so that you will get credited by the judge as providing a more sophisticated response.
And you can distinguish it in your POI. You can be like, the response you got from opening
in your
this,
speech you made.
And I just put it straight into my POI. Make it clear that you're adding something. Just make it very quick. I think that's your response to this?
That's just like 10% too smug for me. But I would certainly do that in my speech. I'd be like, but also in DLO, you heard our response, which was better, right? Because what we explained it was related to context, stakeholder, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of POI I like. Yeah, I hate red herring POIs. I just think it's like they're fun, but there's just this chance that the judge will just get pissed off by it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to gamble with that. Maybe you do.
Maybe not like with a fake case. I think that's a bit juvenile. But like with a like say a rebuttal to their case that you don't think is actually that important to get from fucking
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
like
Yeah.
like ask them like a really basic rebuttal question, they derail and spend 45 seconds on it. Sometimes if you think your case is not easy, like if you have an extension and you think it's quite good and you think it's not easy to respond to quickly, I would just POI it. Like, be like,
No.
I would sometimes.
No, that's so risky though.
I know if there's a high risk strategy, but what's really good is when you can POI something that's like
You know,
like
there's
an
only
extension.
one speaking doing it, right? It's DLO.
What? No.
I think there are
Oh,
ways
yeah,
to
yeah,
give
yeah,
POI.
yeah.
Stop doing it
Yeah.
CPM. Because then DLO will stand up and then
Yes.
start taking it. You can do it DLO. I would actually, that's fair. I would do it in the second half of the DLO speech. When they haven't got much time left and they've fucked up their timing and they've got things to do, and you just come out with this cracker fucking extension. Do not do it earlier than DLO.
Yeah,
that's my
fair,
record.
that's fair. But you know why? It's because it's so gold when you POI something that's going to be your
Oh,
extension. And the speaker stands there kind of speechless for 10 seconds.
How good is it? How good is it when it's like a minute to a minute and a half left in DLO? They're taking one right before the bell. And then it's like, but what about this fucking great case? And it's like, next episode on Dragon Ball Z, because like you're just going to be right there
Yeah.
at Darth Member.
So what about trap POIs? Trap is the wrong word, but POIs that don't give away your extension, but where the answer is something that helps contribute to
I'm
your
just
extension.
gonna say,
I love
I hope Nathaniel's watching at home. You've triggered my trap card.
Yeah.
I just watched them. I realize it's not helpful.
What do you? Sorry, just go into a little bit more detail. What do you mean trap POI?
So a trap POI is a point of information that POIs on something innocuous that, and the judge will be like, I don't know why they asked that POI, but then you can stand up and be like, their answer to that POI exposes this deep problem with the way that they think about the world that ties in directly to what my extension fixes.
Yeah, you gotta be careful there, right?
You don't want to give away your
Because-
extension. That's the problem.
Because I think the thing is that the degree to which the tension between that POI and your extension is harmful depends on how close they are.
Yeah.
But obviously, the more innocuous thing the POI, the more easy it is for the judge to be able to reconcile in their own mind that there is actually a substantive difference in worlds between the POI presented.
Yeah,
and the extension.
and also there will be some that are very, very effective and some that are just like.
I've seen you
flop
do them before, though. I've seen you do them before. Probably work half the time.
Yeah, and also remember, if we kind of think that closing POIs are a bit useless, I'm very much of the you either need to generate inefficiencies or give yourself a little bit of ammunition for later on. Yeah, but of course, POIs are also the opportunity for an opposition to close something within their case. So sometimes they benefit the opposition as much as they benefit you. Any other anonymous questions? Or should I
Sorry,
throw it
I've
on?
got really quickly. I have a random thing, which is
What about Charles' question?
it's really quick. It's really take a POI and take it earlier in your speech.
Oh yeah.
Fuck taking
God,
POIs
right.
after 5 minutes. Take one at 3. If you're like BP, non-BP, whatever, stop after like 2 or 3 minutes and take a POI.
Yeah, I agree.
say I'm a
Take
fan
it early.
of taking the bell POI. I think a lot of the times, especially like watch teams that automatically offer POIs on the bell, they will very often not have a good POI or haven't properly thought out
Yeah,
their
then you
POI.
can be like, I don't understand, move on.
Yeah, or they'll just like blabber there for a second, and nothing
Yeah.
looks worse than a team wasting your time in front of the judge, not having a POI, and then you just shame them. You put them down, you call them unprofessional. Just
I think
roast them.
that's bad faith debating. I think you should take one early.
What do you mean take one early?
Do what Grace said.
No, but I know. So take one at the first bell.
So take one
very
sorry, I think
early.
you meant at the 6 minutes.
No, sorry. Sorry, you take them at the. You take.
That's hilarious.
You take no. It
Yeah,
has
no,
worked
that's
before.
a-
It has
oh,
worked in
sorry,
like
yeah.
high level debates where
Okay.
just like even in like out rounds, I'll accept a POI. No, it worked
I
in
completely
a.
misinterpreted that. We stand.
Do you know what was
That's
amazing?
hilarious.
It happened at the joint scroll trial last year, and I won't name and shame the speaker who did it, but a speaker who is like a bit automatic, just a well-trained speaker who offered a POI like 1 minute through my second speech on the bell. I accepted their POI. They had nothing. They stood there for like 5 seconds until it was obvious they hadn't thought of everything. I just waved them down. I'll be like, my POIs. Yeah.
So I had a
Question.
question.
Okay, we're ready. We got to take some questions.
We're going to take Charles' question. Vickers is saying name and shame.
No, there were-
name redacted.
Name redacted. Drafted on the tab.
Here we go. From Shah, public
Shah.
suggestion. Nowadays, second speaker splits that analyze impact to a separate stakeholder, 3v3, are becoming less important. See a previous episode, I think we talked about that. If the stakeholder is important, it would be brought up at first. You're right, Shah. That is a good way to view debating. You're right. The other
This is my approach to second.
the other options are to analyze impacts in depth. What are your thoughts on having a responsive or mitigatory split in debates where it's fairly clear what the clash is going to be? Nah, like at second you have responsive material and you have substantive material. And your substantive material should be, in my view, an additional mechanism in order to convince the judge why you can best serve the stakeholder which you've decided is important inside the debate.
So this is where I'll push back quite strongly against Joe. And I think it mirrors an earlier discussion we had, whereas I do not think there's a big difference between rebuttal and substantive. They're both about asserting a particular world. And the way I break down my second speeches isn't into responsive material and substantive material. It's defensive material. So either I'm building up pre-existing material, responding to their cases, or extension material, which is what am I adding to the debate? And it can be like brand new extensions. And sometimes, especially if you're second neg, a big bit of extension could be adding a killer bit of building as to why their case doesn't operate clearly. And the parallel, the mirror image of that is a good mechanism that helps you develop it. But I'd encourage you to think of these like how you prioritize your time within the speech shouldn't be about, oh, I need a mechanism to develop a little bit more, or I need to spend like a lot of time developing this really good bit of response that takes out a lot of their case. You just think about the one which is more effective and you frame it as extension material.
You go.
But this is just a question of semantics, right? We basically agree. We're just public servants sitting around for 3 hours deciding what words should go on a pamphlet.
I disagree. I disagree. We are talking about something different. You're not disagree. I don't think we should have a mechanism. It can be a responsive material.
Okay, I want to go back to something I was talking about in the previous episode, because I think this is a big source of tension here.
Yeah.
We have developed norms and systems of thinking about debaters.
Yeah.
Which
we live in a society.
No, but seriously, right? And it means that judges are taught either through the accreditation system or through developed norms to think about debating in certain ways. And that means that they build in expectations as to what they view as acceptable and unacceptable in debating. If you fail to meet those expectations a lot of times, you'll fuck up because judges won't like what you're doing. Whether normatively that's good or bad, whatever, but I think we have to be careful to meet the expectations of the judges that exist on the circuit, not the judges we wish we had on the circuit.
So where I'd push back there a little bit is though I think people are attached to labels. Phrasing stuff as extension material versus engaging with the rest of the debate, I don't think harms you. And in fact, if it allows you to engage better with the issues of the debate or to convince the judge more, sure, you can change up your labels, claim some tiny mechanism you're saying as your like split material or your like added mechanism. But I don't think it's hugely important. And also the second thing I'd say is New Zealand, that's very true of the New Zealand circuit, deeply untrue of other circuits. I think at international debating, we lose often because we aren't in tune with the way that the rest of the world debates. And so that's something to push back, especially because people do a lot of BP debating, and BP uses the language of extension material and that builds in. Sorry, last thing before obviously we have a contribution. Last thing I'd say is also, this is exactly the opportunity where we should be like, let's stop teaching judges to judge using like random like buzzwords that they try and pick out of people's speeches and rather just engage with the issues. So I think like, of course we have norms that have developed for a reason, but let's continue those development of those norms for a reason. And maybe we're wrong and we should just slightly change up the way we do things. Innovation's a great thing.
It's helpful for judges to have like agreed upon terms that signal certain parts of speeches. It's like, that's how the human brain works.
No, sorry, you're all wrong. You're all wrong. This isn't about being normative here. It's not about saying judges should have certain expectations and norms and ways to think about debating because that's helpful to them. It's not saying we should break those norms because we want to normatively to break debating. It's just saying judges have them. Judges are imperfect. We can turn up in random fucking in-rounds with panels that we hate. The judges from random countries with bad debating circuits who just get shoved on a panel because they got some weird-ass feedback in the previous round of Worlds, and then you just come in, and then it's like, look, you just have to grapple with the simplistic expectations and norms that judges have. I swear, like, I don't think it's desirable. I think you're wrong. I don't think we should try to break it. I think that's a mistake for winning. They're just there. They're just there, and we're just trying to win.
Yes, correcting. I love winning so much. Correcting norms and debating is so much different than winning.
Oh
so
no,
sorry.
winning.
Oh no, I agree. I don't think it is actually as helpful as people are making it out to be. Like surely there might be some old judges who randomly punish you because you're not using the words that they want.
Oh,
But I think most judges look at your contribution and be like, these are, and of course sometimes I flex up my language a little bit. So I'll introduce something as a split material or add mechanism.
Okay, that's
It's
fine.
more about what you actually want to do with your speech. And what I try to do with my second speeches is to push the debate forward. And sometimes a really useful addition to the debate will be developing an excellent new response that hasn't been dealt with before and spending a lot of time doing that. And sometimes it'll be adding a really strong new mechanism that you're able to develop. And we should just be flexible.
Then I don't disagree with you,
Okay.
but it's important that we couch it in language that the judge can understand.
Okay, yeah.
I
And
want a question.
Yeah, sorry. Carry
Oh,
on.
no, sorry. Sorry, are we done? Sorry.
No, carry on. I just think extension is like a fairly normal word to use. Maybe
Oh,
not
yeah.
as not much in 3v3, but I think judges understand. So I personally just think judges understand me when I'm like, here's what we said, here's what they said, and I do my thing there, and here's what I'm going to extend on, here's what I'm going to make sure. Like, I think that's just quite
No,
acceptable.
I was saying you should get a question from the
Oh,
audience.
yes, definitely.
Because it's been heated. I felt it now,
Oh.
but- Sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you off.
Amber wanted us to unbox our groceries.
Look, we won't unbox all of them, but what I will say is in those groceries, unless there have been supply issues, are the ingredients for lolly cake.
Outstanding. So lolly cake is one of those New Zealand things that I've heard about, but I don't think I've ever tasted.
Oh, really?
My experience with fairy bread was terrible. Fairy bread is one of the grossest
Yeah,
things.
fairy bread is
It's
bad.
so good.
Fairy bread.
And so Tara massively disagrees with me about this particular point, but it is gross. But I love pavlova. I think pavlova is one of New Zealand's greatest additions to the culinary world. So I'll say that.
So for Clayton's, there was a motion suggestion form, and someone suggested a lolly cake recipe.
Mhm.
There was no motion in it. I think they just wanted to share their thoughts, and so I'm making that recipe.
When are we? Sorry, on Clayton's. When are we holding Clayton's this year?
I think I heard something about summer Clayton's.
I think
We're just generating the conversation.
I'd actually really encourage people to contact their
Yeah.
campus president, not other presidents. Don't contact other
Amber?
presidents. That would be really bad if you contacted other presidents in our very small, tight-knit, friendly debating community. You can contact your president in the South Island and encourage them to handle.
Yeah,
summer
one
Clayton's.
thing I chatted about is I repeatedly have floated the idea of hosting Throppy at somewhere like Topol and just trying to adopt more Clayton's model.
Sorry,
I
I
think-
don't know what Throppy is.
So Throppy is just, you've been to Throppy.
What? I'm just hearing these words. Clayton's is a great tournament, and if you go to Canterbury, you should talk to Will Miller.
No, it wasn't.
If you go to a
It So the point I was making is that Clayton's is able to be held at like campgrounds because of its like relative size. So I think there's an interesting discussion there. What happens to the identity of Clayton's when lots and lots of people come from all over the country and it's just a lot bigger?
Well, we had Umber there last year in the Slayer.
Yeah, one Aucklander. It's a huge.
Well, we had
Umber was the one who made that point to me. Just like Throppy logistically is huge, and if you get Clayton up to like a similar size, it becomes hard to have the Clayton size.
well,
Anyway, sorry. Also, when do you think it would be? Would it be like in November, December, between like Vic IV and like Worlds and that area, or are we thinking it's going to be in the summer, like afterwards?
I don't know if on a live stream's the right time to do this.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to Worlds.
Oh no! I just mean like time wise. Like no, we might not.
I'm
We
sorry.
don't know. We don't know.
I'm
don't
really
think-
sad. I really want to go
I
to
know,
Worlds.
we all really want to go.
I want
Worlds.
to go and eat pork with Nick in Korea. We have to
I've
do that again.
realised I don't think we're going to Worlds. I don't think it's going to happen.
I'm just
in which
holding
case,
faith. I think it's hard to predict.
In
I'm
which
of course
case-
I'm way less optimistic than I was.
New Year's Queens.
New Year's Clayton's.
Oh.
I think something else said might have better things to do.
Yeah.
All right.
like
maybe not,
online
maybe
Worlds.
not you and me.
Yeah,
other cool
But look,
people.
what I think would be cool is if they do end up cancelling Worlds, and obviously there's much less international tourism. I think New Zealand, because I think we'll send quite a lot of teams. Obviously, there's no cost barrier. A lot of people otherwise would have been dissuaded to do it. I think we'll probably be more willing to do it. I think we should all go somewhere together, maybe like Topol, maybe like Queenstown.
Maybe like Queenstown.
Yeah, somewhere with decent internet. But just floating this out for obviously the president's.
But even if we didn't go to Worlds, like a whole bunch of us should go to Queenstown and go hang out. It'd be fun.
Let's be the sole proppers up of the coffee time shop there. Let's keep it
They have
afloat.
a cookie time shop. So if there's not another anonymous question, can I introduce another thing that I think is going to create heated, controversial
Oh,
discussion?
yes, you can.
How do you respond to principled material or the
Mm.
framework that another team wants to bring, or their win
Mm.
conditions?
I'm so bad at that.
Me too, which is why I think we should discuss it.
But that's why you shouldn't speak first.
I've no intention of.
No, no.
Yeah, I don't want to learn new things. I've learned all the new things I want to learn.
Just either accept it or reject it. And don't spend any time on it. Just be like, either the stakeholder they care about is important or it's not. If it's important, agree and then just work on making their life better. If their stakeholders shit, then explain why their stakeholders shit. Like, if it was like an IR debate and they said, well, for principled reasons of sovereignty, we think Bashar al-Assad should rule Syria because we don't care that he used white phosphorus rounds against his people. You could stand up and be like, well, actually, we think the principle of sovereignty has been contravened here because he used chemical weapons against our people. Okay, that's probably enough. If you need to go into it more. If you're like, we think this debate about Syria should be about the displaced and refugee populations of the region who have largely been the worst victims as a result of the Syrian civil war. You could stand up and be like, we agree, and we think we have a different, mutually exclusive pathway of serving those people.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's it, right? Like, either they pick Bashar al-Assad and they're fucking wrong, or they pick the reasonable stakeholder in the debate, they're right, let's move on.
I think there's very few instances where you actually end up able to have a philosophical argument
Yeah.
about one principle versus the other. Like, I think it happens, and in that instance, you're probably just going to learn from the debate. But I think it's actually quite rare. It tends to be that you weigh it against some other principle you support or you accept.
Like,
what
And
Joe
debating Nietzsche's right, like, God is dead and we killed him. Like, everything is utilitarianism now. Like,
In New Zealand, I have lost debates overseas, quite a few debates. And of course, we all noticed this at Cinnamon Scroll when all of the Australian teams were running their non-contingent principled points and then being very outraged in the feedback that it didn't win them the debate because the New Zealand judges were like, that's dumb, I don't agree with it. So we've definitely got a norm here in New Zealand of that. What I think it would be a useful discussion for New Zealanders who want to debate in other contexts. What is a good way to smack down those principled contentions? What are your go-tos for establishing consequentialism within a debate?
I'm loath to say this because philosophy hurts my brain so much. Like, I'm just the worst with it. You know, who knows me will know this. But maybe, like, I don't know, read some philosophy. Watch some
no, it's
YouTubers.
so much more fucking easy than that.
Alright.
It's like, okay, fine. Maybe it's not utilitarianism. Maybe it's just caring about vulnerable people. Just explain why vulnerable people's lives are bad and maybe why you owe a societal duty. And the societal duty stuff is real basic, right? So you can run like classic, like lottery of birth stuff, i.e. you didn't have choice into what kind of household or community you were born, so whatever. You could run material about how like even their lives impact your life because like if they grow up in poverty and enter a life of crime that has downstream societal impacts and whatever. I don't know, I just don't think it's hard or complicated or actually I don't even think it's that interesting.
No,
Because I think there's an acceptable Overton window of principal material and it is basically just focused on who's the most vulnerable person in the debate and how can we improve their lives. Obviously there's some degree of scale there.
Yeah.
I found that didn't go down that well at Worlds recently. I don't know if it's
Really?
just Connor and I were bad at it. Probably were just bad at
Probably
it.
just bad at it.
Yeah. One of the things that I would say, and this is why I think New Zealanders are very, very good at actually, is when we are grounding material, and you'll often see New Zealand teams just love sometimes to debate against a principled team that wants to run some random one contention because they'll just like dunk on them repeatedly, and they'll bring really strong emotional rhetoric, like clear rhetoric that explains to you the human impacts of things. And so often when you have these two worldviews that you'd have to go into like very boring philosophy to actually start to resolve, make sure that you just ground the debate, be very reasonable. I think Ben Jackson obviously does this very, very well, using that like reasonable but emotive and strong rhetorical language. So that's on one phrase. But I also just think point out the fact that most principles like internally don't make sense. So just have your like one line of response. Firstly, we just wouldn't accept that this principle applies to this thing because of this internal inconsistency or this other thing. And then being like, but even if it was true, we would not sacrifice these people for that principle. Make it very clear what you're trading off. Make it very clear to the judge how important that group is using your skills of rhetoric, your skills of analysis.
Can we just talk about skills of rhetoric here?
Mhm.
I think a lot of people think skills of rhetoric is to tell me 7 times how poor and vulnerable someone is.
No, yeah.
And it really isn't. It really isn't. I just, the rhetorical contributions by some people in this country are just, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, I don't know about you, but for me, rhetoric is often about storytelling.
Of course it is.
So
Of course
it's
it is.
not about repeating the same thing over and over.
It's actually all about storytelling, because what rhetoric actually is attempting to build empathy. And how do you build empathy? You need to build someone's realistic picture of their life.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And that's where one of the interesting discussions happens about like the humanness of judges within debating. Like they're not
We
just
talked about this
robots.
a week or
Yeah,
two
yeah.
ago, I think.
And so I think we talked about trust then. You want to get the judge to trust you. You should do things to build their trust in you. But you should also be thinking about their empathy, their human reaction to things, and how they
And
how they deal with it.
perhaps that means you need to think a little bit about who is on your panel and what they might care about.
Yeah.
Maybe that's bad, but maybe you should do it.
And also, just I think my general bit of feedback for going overseas and having people who do massively weight this type of principle material is you just need to be thorough. You just need to have that frontline response to each of the things that they bring out, because there's nothing worse than doing it. What works in New Zealand, just being like, we think this principle is dumb. We wouldn't trade these people's lives for X thing. And then your international judge will be like, no, that's clearly not enough. Obviously, they frame this as non-contingent. You need to deal with it as a non-contingent principle and explain why your material is better. You just got to do it, right? And so even if you're never running that material, got to address it in a clear way.
If I wrote an international form, I would simply be very good at debating.
No,
You are
Well-
good at debating. You've broken the really well at world, so it's true.
Do you have a question?
No.
I think that's time up.
Do you have questions for
believe.
each other?
We have questions for each other, but do we want to save them for a later episode? Because it's already been an hour.
How are you, Daniel?
I've struggled a little bit with lockdown.
Okay.
I think juggling all my work and all my deadlines coming up is stressing me out a little bit. Yeah, and it's not actually about the lockdown. Like I get a lot of exercise, get a lot of sun. I cook, I hang out with my friends. I'm still quite social. I get to do things like this. It's about the way that I think the lockdown for me has created extra like pressure points and like multiplied those pressure points. And
Grace and I were talking today. Do you want to do a midwinter Christmas? A flat midwinter Christmas?
Yes!
That'd be so nice.
that would be
Like,
sick.
so I was thinking we could do like a nice meal together and we could do like a secret Santa.
I love
I think it'd
secrets.
be really fun.
Yeah. And so that'll be a fun thing for us. We were also thinking of having a fun celebration at the end of this lockdown.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun. A flat
Am I allowed
defrosting.
to advertise this?
Yeah.
Well, Auckland-based people or friends of ours,
Friends of
might be-
ours.
friends
They
of ours who
might
who
do an invite.
might be invited to a massive fucking party at our a reasonably sized party at our place.
Yeah, our place is not enormous, and it's also quite.
We'll be checking who's watched this show.
Cheeky agent of chaos.
Yeah. Nice. It was lovely to chat to you all. We will see you. So we're looking to do these once every Friday. I think it's going to be our vibe going forward. And also, if you are interested in the discussion about responsiveness and you want to go over some of the basics, like for example, what are all the things that can go wrong with a point? Is it uncomparative? Is it contradictory? Does it have like missing context? Is the logical application incorrect? I did a development seminar a couple of weeks ago that goes quite thoroughly into those issues. So much more from those basics perspective. And those are good things to incorporate in your training routine to help making them intuitive, where obviously the discussions we have in here are a little bit more high level, a little bit more fun. That's more just like what I think every single debater should know. Less of my controversial statements.
Nodes time.
This time, well,
Time for nodes. I'm sending those
noodles.
to our flat now.
We're gonna be having our Xi'an noodles. Lovely to see you all.
Nodes. Our friends love it.